History is filled with questions that refuse to stay in the past. Across centuries and continents, certain events and artifacts have left behind gaps in our understanding that no amount of modern science or scholarship has been able to fill. This is a journey through 20 of the most compelling historical mysteries that no one can explain. You will discover the known facts and the fascinating theories that try, yet ultimately fail, to solve these puzzles for good. We will explore everything from an entire colony that vanished leaving only a single cryptic word, to an ancient book written in a language that still defies every expert and computer. These are not simple riddles, they are profound enigmas that challenge our perception of human achievement, resilience, and even reality itself. What do you believe is the most haunting question left unanswered by history? Our first mystery begins with a name carved into wood. In the late 16th century, the English made a bold attempt to establish a permanent foothold in the New World. A group of about 115 men, women, and children, led by Governor John White, landed on Roanoke Island, off the coast of what is now North Carolina. The year was 1587. Soon after their arrival, the governor's daughter gave birth to a baby girl, Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas. But the settlement faced immediate hardship. Supplies were low, and tensions with some local indigenous communities were high. Governor White was persuaded to sail back to England for more provisions, a trip he expected to take only a few months. History, however, had other plans. A massive naval conflict between England and Spain delayed his return for 3 long years. When he finally sailed back to Roanoke Island in 1590, he found the settlement utterly deserted. The houses had been carefully dismantled, suggesting a planned departure, not a panicked flight. There were no signs of a struggle, and most importantly, no people. The only clue was a single word carved into a wooden post, Croaton, and the letters CRO carved into a nearby tree. Croaton was the name of a nearby island, and also the name of a community of indigenous people who lived there and had been friendly to the English. Governor White believed this carving was a message telling him where the colonists had gone. He intended to sail to Croaton Island the next day, but a violent storm blew his ships out to sea, forcing them to return to England. He never made it back to search again. So what happened to the lost colony? For centuries, the theories have swirled. The most persistent idea is that the colonists, facing starvation and isolation, integrated with the Croaton people or other nearby tribes. Some historical accounts from later English settlers mention encountering indigenous people with grey eyes or who spoke English, which fueled this belief. Other theories suggest a catastrophic event, perhaps illness or conflict, though the orderly state of the abandoned site argues against a sudden attack. The mystery is deepened by a complete lack of archaeological evidence pointing to a specific fate. No graves, no hidden caches of English goods, no definitive proof has ever been found. The lost colony of Roanoke endures not just as a historical puzzle, but as a powerful symbol. It represents the fragile line between settlement and disappearance, and the haunting silence that can follow when an entire community simply vanishes from the record, leaving behind only a single, unreadable word. While a vanished colony leaves a physical emptiness, another mystery taunts us with the presence of an object we can see and touch, yet cannot understand. This is the Voynich Manuscript, a book that seems to whisper secrets in a language no one alive can speak. Created on fine vellum, likely in the 15th century, it is a beautiful and utterly baffling artifact. Its pages are filled with flowing, elegant handwriting in an unknown script, accompanied by illustrations that are both familiar and deeply strange. You will see delicate paintings of plants that do not match any known species, intricate astronomical charts featuring unknown constellations and drawings of small, nude women bathing in what appears to be a system of green, interconnected pools. From the moment it entered the historical record, it has been a cipher that defies every attempt at solution. The manuscript's known journey begins centuries after its creation. It resurfaces in the court of Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II in Prague, who reportedly purchased it for a significant sum of 600 gold coins. It later passed through the hands of alchemists and scholars before disappearing again, only to be rediscovered in 1912 by a Polish book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich, from whom it takes its name. Since then, it has been studied by the world's top cryptographers, linguists, and historians, including teams from both world wars who broke far more complex military codes. All have failed. The theories about what it represents are as varied as its bizarre illustrations. Some believe it is an elaborate, centuries-old hoax, a meaningless book created to deceive a wealthy patron. Others argue it is written in a constructed language or a highly personal cipher, perhaps encoding a lost system of natural philosophy or early medical knowledge. The most tantalizing possibility is that it preserves genuine knowledge from a lost culture or tradition, its meaning forever separated from us by time. Modern computational analysis has only deepened the mystery. The text displays a statistical structure eerily similar to real languages, with word patterns and repetitions that suggest it is not random gibberish. Yet, despite supercomputers and artificial intelligence, its code remains unbroken. The Voynich Manuscript stands as a unique monument to human curiosity, a locked door for which we have spent 600 years searching for a key that may not even exist. The silent enigma of a book is one thing, but the ocean offers a different kind of mystery, one of sudden and complete absence. On a calm December afternoon in 1872, a British merchant ship named the Dei Gratia spotted another vessel drifting aimlessly in the Atlantic between the Azores and Portugal. As they drew closer, they recognized it as the Mary Celeste, a brigantine that had left New York for Genoa a month before. Something was deeply wrong. The ship was sailing with its sails partially set, but it showed no signs of life. After hailing it repeatedly with no answer, the crew of the Dei Gratia boarded the Mary Celeste. What they found has become the very definition of a ghost ship. The vessel was perfectly seaworthy, its hull intact and its cargo of industrial alcohol still secure in its barrels. There was a 6-month supply of food and fresh water. The personal belongings of the captain, his family, and the 7 crew members were all in place, as if they had just stepped away. Yet every single soul was gone. The ship's only lifeboat was missing, and the last log entry was from 10 days prior, noting nothing more alarming than routine sailing conditions. It was as if the 10 people on board had simply evaporated into the sea air. So why would an experienced captain, Benjamin Briggs, along with his wife, young daughter, and a capable crew, abandon a perfectly sound ship in the middle of the ocean? The theories began almost immediately and have multiplied ever since. The most popular explanation centers on the cargo. Fearing that fumes from the alcohol might cause an imminent explosion, the crew may have taken to the lifeboat as a precaution, tethering it to the ship with a rope. If that rope snapped or was cut, they would have been left adrift, watching helplessly as their ship sailed away without them. Another idea suggests a sudden, violent underwater earthquake, a seaquake, that could have caused a loud noise and shaking, convincing everyone the ship was about to break apart. Piracy was considered, but there was no sign of a struggle or theft. Mutiny makes little sense as the captain was well regarded and the crew left all their possessions behind. Even theories of collective madness or a panic driven by some shared hallucination have been proposed. The problem with every single theory is the evidence, or rather, the lack of it. Each scenario contains a fatal contradiction. If they feared an explosion, why was there no sign of fire or attempted firefighting? If a seaquake occurred, why was the ship and its delicate cargo completely undamaged? The orderly state of the vessel rules out violence, and the ample supplies rule out desperation. With no bodies ever recovered and no definitive clue left behind, the Mary Celeste remains frozen in that moment of discovery. It is not a story of horror, but one of profound and unsettling silence, a perfectly preserved snapshot of a decision we will never understand, securing its place forever as the archetypal ghost ship mystery. From the silent decks of a ghost ship, we journey to a discovery that speaks volumes, yet in a language of mathematics and stars that we are only just beginning to translate. Off the coast of a small Greek island, sponge divers in the year 1900 found themselves surrounded by the treasures of the deep. Amidst the broken marble and ceramic from an ancient Roman-era shipwreck, they recovered a lump of heavily corroded bronze and wood, so encrusted it was initially set aside with little thought. Decades later, as the crust was carefully removed, archaeologists realized this was not a rock or a statue. It was a machine. The Antikythera Mechanism is a device of such bewildering complexity that it single-handedly rewrote our understanding of ancient technological capability. Roughly the size of a large shoebox, it was housed in a wooden case and operated by a hand crank. Inside, a system of at least 30 precise interlocking bronze gears, some with teeth finer than a millimeter, worked together like the components of a modern analog computer. This was not a tool for war or simple timekeeping. It was a celestial calculator. By turning the crank, an ancient user could predict the positions of the sun and moon, track the phases of our lunar companion, and even forecast eclipses with remarkable accuracy. One dial could model the irregular orbit of the moon, a complexity not mathematically formalized until the 17th century. Another tracked the 4-year cycle of the ancient Olympic Games. This was a portable planetarium, a demonstration of a highly advanced understanding of astronomy and mechanical engineering, all created in the 1st or 2nd century before the Common Era. And that is the heart of the mystery. Who built this? The craftsmanship suggests it was not unique, but rather an example of a known technology, perhaps from a great workshop in Rhodes or Alexandria. But if such knowledge was so widespread, why is this the only example ever found? Why do no historical texts from the period describe anything remotely like it? The mechanism represents a peak of scientific sophistication that then seems to vanish completely from the human record. For over 1,000 years, nothing of comparable mechanical complexity appears anywhere in the world until the great astronomical clocks of medieval Europe. It is as if a single, brilliant light switched on, illuminated one incredible object, and then was snuffed out, leaving the following centuries in a different kind of darkness. The Antikythera Mechanism forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about the linear progression of knowledge. Was this a glorious dead end, the work of a lone genius whose teachings were lost? Or does it hint at a whole lineage of ancient technology, a school of thought and craftsmanship that simply did not survive the turbulent collapse of the classical world? It stands not as a ruin, but as a perfectly engineered question mark from the depths, challenging our assumptions about what the ancient world was truly capable of achieving. High above the arid plains of southern Peru, the desert floor itself becomes a canvas of colossal and cryptic art. These are the Nazca Lines, a sprawling gallery of geoglyphs so vast they can only be truly comprehended from the sky. Etched into the dark, stony surface of the Pampa Colorada over 2,000 years ago, the lines form hundreds of distinct figures. You will find a hummingbird with wings outstretched over 300 feet, a spider nearly 150 feet long, a monkey with an intricately coiled tail, and a strange, humanoid figure often called the astronaut. Alongside these biomorphic shapes are miles of perfectly straight lines, immense trapezoids, and complex geometric spirals that run across the landscape for miles, cutting across hills and valleys with unwavering precision. The sheer scale is staggering, and the technical feat of their creation by the Nazca culture, without the aid of flight or modern tools, is a profound achievement. Using simple stakes and ropes, they meticulously removed the reddish surface stones to reveal the lighter-colored earth beneath, creating lines that have endured for millennia in one of the driest places on Earth. But why? For what possible reason would a people invest such immense communal effort into creating art they could never see in its entirety? The mystery of their purpose has fueled wild speculation for decades, most famously the idea that they were landing strips for ancient astronauts, a theory that overlooks the sophistication of the culture itself. Modern archaeology offers more grounded yet equally fascinating hypotheses. Many researchers believe the lines served a deeply spiritual function, intimately tied to the most precious resource in the desert, water. The Nazca depended on underground aquifers and rare seasonal floods. Some of the longest lines point directly toward sources of water in the distant mountains, suggesting they may have been ceremonial pathways for processions to honor water deities, a form of ritual prayer for life-giving rain. The animal figures, many of which are species associated with water in local mythology, could be offerings or symbols to these same powers. Another compelling theory views the geoglyphs as a giant astronomical calendar, with certain lines aligning with the sun, moon, and stars during significant solstices or agricultural cycles, helping to mark the passage of time and the seasons for planting. Others see them as spaces for large community gatherings, where different social groups might have walked the lines during rituals to reinforce cultural identity and connection to the land. The true answer is elusive, partly because the Nazca left no written records to explain their vision. We are left to interpret their silent symbols across a vast, open-air temple. This transforms the mystery from a simple riddle into a profound lesson in humility. The lines remind us that a culture's most important beliefs and greatest communal projects might leave behind no manual, only a magnificent and cryptic signature on the earth itself, visible only from a perspective they could never physically achieve, yet perhaps always held in their collective mind's eye. The desert's silent artwork gives way to an ocean region that speaks in a language of sudden and complete absence. For decades, the name alone has conjured images of ships and planes vanishing into thin air, swallowed by an inexplicable force. The Bermuda Triangle, a loosely defined area of the western Atlantic bounded by Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, is perhaps the world's most famous modern geographical mystery. Its legend is built not on ancient artifacts, but on a chilling series of 20th-century incidents where vessels and aircraft disappeared without a trace, often under calm and clear conditions. The story truly captured the public imagination with a single military training flight. On a routine afternoon in December 1945, 5 United States Navy Avenger bombers, known as Flight 19, took off from Fort Lauderdale with an experienced instructor and 13 student pilots. The flight was a simple navigation exercise, but something went terribly wrong. Radio transmissions revealed the squadron leader was disoriented, his compasses malfunctioning. He reported seeing unfamiliar islands and stated they seemed to be over the Gulf of Mexico, though they should have been over the Atlantic. His final, haunting words crackled over the radio, describing white water and the ocean looking strange. Then silence. A massive sea and air search was launched, involving hundreds of planes and ships. Not only did they fail to find Flight 19, but one of the search planes, a Martin Mariner flying boat with 13 crew members, also vanished during the operation. 27 men were lost that day, and no wreckage from any of the 6 aircraft was ever found. This incident, coupled with earlier tragedies like the loss of the massive Navy collier USS Cyclops in 1918 with over 300 souls aboard, cemented the Triangle's fearsome reputation. So what really happens in this stretch of ocean? Scientists and maritime experts point to a confluence of very real, if extraordinary, natural phenomena. The region is known for sudden, violent storms that can appear with little warning. The ocean floor is a complex terrain where massive eruptions of methane gas hydrates could theoretically bubble up, decreasing the water's density enough to cause a ship to lose buoyancy and sink rapidly. The area is also one of the few places on Earth where true magnetic north and geographic north align, which can cause compass readings to become unreliable if not properly adjusted, a potential factor in Flight 19's disorientation. Furthermore, the powerful Gulf Stream current can swiftly carry debris far from the site of any accident, explaining a lack of wreckage. Yet, for every logical explanation, a more speculative theory arises. Some suggest distortions in space-time, portals to other dimensions, or even the submerged technology of the lost city of Atlantis interfering with instruments. The enduring power of the mystery, however, may lie more in psychology and statistics than in the paranormal. Detailed analyses by organizations like Lloyd's of London and the United States Coast Guard have repeatedly shown that the rate of disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle is not statistically higher than in any other similarly trafficked part of the ocean, when factoring in the volume of ships and planes that pass through. The difference is narrative. The high-profile, dramatic nature of losses like Flight 19 and the Cyclops, all clustered under a catchy name, created a perfect storm for a modern myth. We connected the dots of tragedy across decades and wove them into a story of a place that defies the rules, a story so compelling it has endured long after the facts suggested a more mundane, if no less tragic, reality. The Bermuda Triangle, therefore, stands as a mystery not of the ocean but of the human mind, revealing our deep need to find pattern and meaning even in the random, unforgiving nature of the sea. The ocean's impersonal forces can erase all trace of human presence, but history also records a mystery of presence so overwhelming it became a public spectacle of suffering. In the sweltering summer of 1518, the city of Strasbourg witnessed an event that defied all reason. It began with a single woman, Frau Trophia, who stepped into the street and began to dance. Not a joyful dance, but a frantic, compulsive, and utterly relentless movement she could not stop. She danced for days until her feet bled and her body gave out from exhaustion. Within a week, dozens had joined her. Within a month, the crowd of involuntary dancers had swelled to hundreds, men, women, and children, all caught in the same uncontrollable compulsion to move without rest. The city council, initially baffled, decided the best cure was to encourage the dancing to run its course. They cleared a marketplace, hired musicians, and even built a wooden stage, believing that if the dancers could just dance themselves out, the mania would end. It was a catastrophic misjudgment. The music and organized space only seemed to fuel the epidemic. People danced until they collapsed from broken bones, heart failure, or sheer exhaustion. Historical accounts note that at its peak, the dancing plague claimed the lives of as many as 15 people each day. This was not a festival, it was a public health crisis of the most bizarre and tragic kind. To understand why, we must look at the world these people inhabited. The years preceding 1518 in the Strasbourg region were a time of almost unimaginable hardship. A series of devastating harvests had led to severe famine, illness was rampant, the social fabric was frayed by extreme poverty and a pervasive sense of religious dread. The community lived under a constant, crushing weight of anxiety with no outlet and no explanation for their suffering. Modern scholars look back and see not supernatural possession, but a terrifying window into the human mind under extreme duress. The leading explanation is a phenomenon known as mass psychogenic illness, sometimes called conversion disorder. In this state, intense psychological stress, often stemming from a shared trauma or fear, manifests as physical symptoms in a group. The collective anxiety of Strasbourg, with its famine and disease, may have found its release in this one shared physical outburst, a somatic scream expressed through uncontrollable movement. It was a neurological crisis made visible on a city-wide scale. Another plausible theory points to a physical cause, ergot poisoning. Ergot is a fungus that grows on damp rye, a staple grain of the region. When ingested, it can cause convulsions, spasms, hallucinations, and a burning sensation in the limbs, symptoms that could be misinterpreted as a compulsion to dance. Yet, this theory has its complications, as ergot poisoning typically leads to gangrene and severe illness beyond just movement, which the chronicles do not strongly emphasize. Whether the trigger was psychological, physiological, or a devastating combination of both, the dancing plague remains a profound and unsettling mystery. It shows us how a community's unspoken trauma can sometimes erupt in the most literal, physical way, transforming the streets into a theater of shared anguish. This event forces us to ask where the line truly lies between the mind and the body, and how quickly that line can vanish under the weight of collective despair. While the dancing plague revealed a community's internal anguish, another mystery from antiquity speaks of hidden wealth and deliberate, cryptic planning. Among the legendary Dead Sea Scrolls discovered in caves near Qumran, one document stands utterly apart. It is not written on fragile parchment or papyrus, but etched into sheets of corroded copper. This is the Copper Scroll, and it contains not sacred texts or community rules, but what appears to be a detailed inventory of buried treasure. Translated in the 1950s, its text is a straightforward, repetitive list. It describes 64 different caches of precious metals and coins, with quantities so vast they seem almost mythical. The scroll mentions tons of silver and gold, thousands of talents of precious metal, and specific vessels, all supposedly hidden at locations across the Judean desert. One entry, for example, might read, "In the ruin that is in the valley, dig down 7 cubits. There is a chest of silver and its vessels, a weight of 17 talents." The sheer scale of the treasure described would be worth hundreds of millions in today's terms, a fortune that could reshape the history of the region. Yet from the moment of its translation, scholars have been locked in debate over a fundamental question. Is this a literal map to a real fortune, or is it something else entirely? The scroll's physical nature argues for practicality. Copper is far more durable than parchment, suggesting the author intended this record to last, to be found and used long after it was hidden. The instructions, however, are frustratingly vague by modern standards. They reference landmarks, ruins, and valleys with names lost to time, making precise identification nearly impossible. Some researchers believe the treasure was real, perhaps the accumulated wealth of the Jewish temple in Jerusalem, hidden away in the face of the advancing Roman legions around the year 70 of the Common Era. Others contend it is a symbolic record, an inventory of temple assets never meant to be physically retrieved, or even a work of folklore. The mystery has, of course, inspired countless searches. For decades, amateur explorers and professional archaeologists alike have scoured the stark, beautiful landscape of the Judean desert, armed with shovels, maps, and the cryptic clues of the scroll. While these expeditions have uncovered other important archaeological finds, not a single ingot or coin from the Copper Scroll's list has ever been officially recovered. This relentless, fruitless quest adds another layer to the enigma. If the treasure was real and was found in antiquity, why was the expensive Copper Scroll left behind in a cave? If it was never found, why has modern technology and determined searching failed where ancient directions should have succeeded? The copper scroll thus presents a tantalizing duality. It is the most material and practical of mysteries, a literal X marking dozens of spots, yet it remains utterly elusive. It promises unimaginable wealth, not just in gold, but in historical understanding, offering potential proof of lost chapters from a pivotal era. Yet it delivers only a beautiful, metallic question, ensuring its place as the world's most authoritative and most frustrating treasure map. A treasure map etched in copper is a tangible mystery, but some enigmas are carried on the air itself, a vibration felt more than seen. In the high desert of New Mexico, beneath the vast and silent sky of Taos, a persistent sound troubles the peace for a small but significant portion of the population. It is known simply as the Taos Hum. Those who hear it describe a low-frequency, droning noise, like a distant diesel engine idling that never turns off. It is most noticeable indoors at night, a constant, invasive presence that disrupts sleep and concentration, becoming a source of genuine distress for the hearers. The first baffling aspect is its selectivity. Not everyone in the same household or neighborhood can perceive it, and it has proven notoriously difficult to capture on audio recording equipment, leaving those affected without concrete proof of what they are experiencing. This is not an isolated phenomenon. Similar persistent, low-frequency hums have been reported for decades in other parts of the world, from Bristol in England to Largs in Scotland, and a small town in Ontario, Canada. Each locale has its own name for the sound, and each group of hearers shares the same frustration, caught between the undeniable reality of their perception and the lack of an obvious source. Scientific investigations have been launched in several of these places, including a major study in Taos in the 1990s. Researchers brought in sensitive sound monitoring equipment and interviewed hearers. They ruled out the most common suspects: industrial machinery, underground utilities, military communications, or even simple traffic noise. No external, man-made source could be identified that matched the hum's characteristics or explained why only some people could detect it. This left science grappling with a range of more complex hypotheses. One theory points to geological activity, suggesting the hum could be caused by microseisms, extremely faint, continuous tremors in the Earth's crust, or by the slow movement of tectonic plates generating a low-frequency resonance. Another line of inquiry explores electromagnetic radiation, proposing that certain individuals might be sensitive to electromagnetic fields generated by power lines or even solar activity, perceiving them as an auditory sensation. From a physiological perspective, some researchers suggest the hum could be a form of objective tinnitus, where the hearer is actually perceiving a real internal sound generated by their own body, such as blood flow or muscular spasms, amplified by the quiet of their environment. The most psychologically intriguing possibility is that of a mass auditory hallucination, a shared focus on a common, perhaps mundane background noise that is then amplified by anxiety and group discussion into a pervasive phenomenon. Yet none of these explanations fully satisfy. If it is geological, why is it so localized? If it is electromagnetic, why can't instruments designed to measure such fields consistently correlate with the reports? If it is internal, why do clusters of people in specific geographic areas suddenly begin to experience it? The Taos Hum and others like it represent a unique category of mystery, one that exists at the fragile intersection of the environment and human perception. It challenges the very definition of what is real, asking whether a phenomenon experienced so personally by many can be said to exist if it leaves no objective trace for our machines to measure. This elusive sound is more than a nuisance. It is a sensory puzzle that reminds us the world may still hold frequencies of experience just beyond the edge of our collective understanding. A different kind of hum once sang out from the cosmos, a signal so perfect and fleeting it has haunted astronomers for nearly 50 years, On a quiet August night in 1977, the Big Ear radio telescope at Ohio State University was performing its routine scan of the sky, listening to the static hiss of the universe. The data was printed on long, continuous sheets of paper to be reviewed later by hand. Volunteer astronomer Jerry Amon was examining the previous night's readout a few days later when his eye caught a sequence of letters and numbers so extraordinary it made him reach for his red pen. The signal, originating from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius, had lasted for a full 72 seconds, the exact duration the telescope's fixed dish could observe any one point in the sky. On the printout, the signal's intensity was represented by alphanumeric characters, with values rising from 1 to over 9, and then into letters. What Amon saw was the sequence 6EQUJ5. The letters represented values 10 through 35. At its peak, the signal reached an intensity of 30, far louder than the background cosmic noise. Next to this remarkable spike, Jerry Amon simply wrote in red ink, "Wow." That single, astonished annotation gave the signal its immortal name. Its characteristics were what made it so compelling. It was a narrowband signal, meaning it was focused on one specific frequency, just like a radio station. Crucially, that frequency was 1420 MHz, a protected band close to the hydrogen line where international agreements forbid earthly transmissions, because scientists theorized an advanced civilization might use that quiet channel to broadcast its presence. It appeared exactly as a deliberate, artificial signal from the stars should. The immediate assumption was that it would repeat. The telescope was pointed back at that same spot in the sky again and again. Other observatories around the world joined the search, but the wow signal never returned. It was a one-time event, a single, deafening shout in an otherwise silent universe, followed by a permanent and profound silence. The debate over its origin has raged ever since. Some argue it was a human-made signal, perhaps from a secret military satellite or a piece of space debris that briefly reflected a transmission from Earth back to the receiver. Others propose a natural, if exceptionally rare, astrophysical event, like a comet emitting a burst of radio waves, though subsequent studies have challenged that explanation. Yet the possibility that lingers, the one that gives the wow signal its enduring power, is that for 72 seconds we may have overheard a message not meant for us. It represents the ultimate cosmic tease, a single data point that fits the profile of contact so perfectly it cannot be dismissed, yet its solitary nature makes it impossible to verify. The wow signal is not evidence, it is a question. It asks us to consider the vastness of cosmic time and the loneliness of our own listening. If another intelligence did call out, our window to hear it was shorter than a commercial break, a whisper lost in the static of the galaxy, leaving behind nothing but a red pen mark on a faded piece of paper and a mystery that grows more profound with every silent night. A single, perfect signal from the cosmos speaks of possibilities, while an object of immense earthly power has left only silence in its wake. Few artifacts in human history carry the weight of the Ark of the Covenant. Described in the Hebrew Bible as a gold-covered chest of acacia wood, it was far more than a reliquary. It was understood to be the literal throne of the divine presence, a conduit for communication between heaven and earth. According to tradition, it housed the stone tablets inscribed with the Ten Commandments, the foundational covenant between the Israelites and their deity. For centuries, it resided in the Holy of Holies, the innermost and most sacred chamber of the First Temple in Jerusalem, a place so sanctified that only the high priest could enter, and only once a year. Its last historically recorded location is anchored to that temple, right up until a catastrophic moment in 587 before the Common Era. In that year, the armies of the Babylonian Empire besieged, captured, and ultimately destroyed Jerusalem. The Great Temple was razed to the ground, The biblical account in the book of Jeremiah states that the sacred vessels of the temple were taken as plunder to Babylon. Yet, notably, the ark itself is never explicitly mentioned in the inventory of loot. From that point forward, it vanishes from the historical record, becoming perhaps the most sought-after lost treasure in religious history. So what could have happened to it? The theories fall into three broad and deeply compelling categories. The first is the simplest, that it was destroyed in the Babylonian sack of the city, its gold melted down and its wood burned. Yet, for an object of such supreme significance, its absence from the official plunder list is puzzling, suggesting its fate was already sealed. The second theory proposes it was hidden to protect it from desecration. According to some ancient texts, the prophet Jeremiah, foreseeing the invasion, ordered the ark to be concealed in a cavern deep beneath the Temple Mount itself. This belief has fueled centuries of speculation and clandestine searches, though any excavation in that profoundly sacred and politically volatile site is, and will likely remain, impossible. The third and most enduring set of traditions claims the ark was spirited away to safety in a distant land. The most prominent of these is the ancient Ethiopian tradition, upheld by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. It holds that Menelik I, the son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, brought the ark to Ethiopia, where it has been guarded for millennia by a succession of monks in the chapel of the tablet adjacent to the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in Axum. To this day, a single guardian is appointed for life to watch over it, and no outsider is permitted to see it. Other, lesser-known traditions suggest a journey even farther south, into what is now Zimbabwe, linking the ark to the great stone ruins of Great Zimbabwe. The frustrating and ultimately defining aspect of this mystery is that it exists in a space beyond conventional archaeology. The political and religious sensitivities surrounding the Temple Mount in Jerusalem make any definitive search there unthinkable. The Ethiopian tradition is protected by profound faith and secrecy, not subject to verification. This leaves us with a powerful enigma that transcends mere historical curiosity. The ark's disappearance is not just about the loss of a physical object, but about the rupture of a direct, tangible connection to the divine that its presence represented. Its absence created a theological void, a shift from a god whose presence was localized in a box of gold and wood to a deity whose spirit could be everywhere, yet nowhere specifically. Whether it lies buried, was transported, or was transformed into legend, the Ark of the Covenant endures not as a relic we might one day find, but as a symbol of a lost intimacy with the sacred, its location forever guarded by faith, politics, and the silent stones of history. The Ark's profound absence echoes a different kind of silence, one carved not in gold but in granite, standing in mute rows for thousands of years. Along the windswept coast of Brittany in France, a forest of stone defies easy explanation. The Carnac Stones are one of the most extensive Neolithic monuments on Earth, a sprawling collection of over 3,000 individual standing stones arranged in precise, parallel rows that stretch for miles across the landscape. Erected over a period of several millennia, beginning around 4,500 years before the Common Era, the site is not a single structure but a complex landscape of meaning. There are the great alignments themselves, with stones marching in straight lines like a petrified army. There are solitary, towering menhirs and covered passage graves known as dolmens. There are great earthen mounds or tumuli covering ancient burial chambers. The sheer scale of the labor is almost incomprehensible, each multi-ton stone quarried, transported, and erected by a society with only simple tools and immense determination. For centuries, local folklore offered a magical explanation, claiming the stones were a Roman legion turned to rock by a wizard or a saint, a story that speaks to the site's awe-inspiring presence. Modern archaeology, of course, looks for human purpose behind the myth. The leading theories are as grand as the stones themselves. One compelling idea is that the alignments functioned as a gigantic astronomical observatory. Certain rows appear to point toward the rising or setting sun at the solstices, and the entire complex might have been used to track the cycles of the moon and stars, creating a celestial calendar etched into the earth to guide planting, harvesting, and ritual life. Another interpretation views the site as a sacred territory, a boundary marker for a powerful tribal confederation, its endless rows declaring dominion over the land in a way that everyone could see and understand. Others see it primarily as a vast memorial landscape, a permanent connection to the ancestors, where the lines of stones acted as processional ways leading to the burial mounds and dolmens, physically guiding the living into the realm of the dead for ceremonies. The truth may be a combination of all these functions layered over generations. What remains hauntingly clear is that this was a place of supreme importance, a project that consumed the energy of countless generations. Yet the specific language of its design, the exact rituals performed there, the names of the gods or ancestors honored, have all been erased by time. The Carnac Stones stand as a monumental sentence in a language we have forgotten how to read, their grammar one of alignment and endurance, whispering of a culture that sought to make permanent marks against the relentless passage of the seasons and the certainty of human mortality. From the silent, monumental stones of Carnac, history offers a mystery that is small, human, and deeply strange. In 12th century England, near the village of Woolpit in Suffolk, reapers working in the fields made an astonishing discovery. From a deep trench used for trapping wolves, two children emerged, a boy and a girl. They were dressed in clothing of an unfamiliar material, and most shockingly, their skin had a distinct green tint. They spoke a language no one could understand and were utterly terrified of their rescuers. The villagers took them in, but the children refused all food offered to them until someone brought raw green beans, which they devoured eagerly. According to the chronicles of two respected historians of the time, Ralph of Coggeshall and William of Newburgh, this is not a fable but a recorded event. The boy, who seemed younger and more frail, soon grew ill and passed away. The girl, however, survived and slowly adapted. As she learned to speak English, she lost her green coloration and began to eat a normal diet. Once she could communicate, she was asked to explain her origin. Her account was as cryptic as her appearance. She said she and her brother came from a land she called St. Martin's Land, a place of perpetual twilight where all the people were green and where there was no sun, only a constant, dim glow like the light before dawn. She described hearing a loud sound before finding herself and her brother suddenly in the pit at Woolpit. She could not explain how they got there or where their homeland was in relation to England. After her assimilation, she lived a normal life, eventually marrying a man from a nearby village, but she was reportedly rather loose and wanton in her conduct, as the chronicler notes with some disapproval. So what are we to make of the Green Children? The story sits precisely at the blurry border between documented history and persistent folklore. One school of thought sees it as pure allegory. The green color could symbolize the wild, untamed state of nature, with the children's gradual loss of green and adoption of English speech representing the process of cultural assimilation, of being civilized into Norman society. Their sole food being green beans could be a metaphorical link to the earth and their foreign origins. Others search for a more literal, historical explanation. A prominent theory suggests the children might have been Flemish immigrants. During this period, Flemish settlers in the region faced persecution, and some may have fled into the dense, forested wilderness known as the Trap. Lost, starving, and suffering from chloroses, a form of anemia that can give the skin a greenish pallor, they might have emerged from a mine shaft or underground hiding place, speaking their native tongue and appearing utterly alien to the Saxon villagers. The perpetual twilight of their homeland could be a child's confused memory of the deep, sunless woods, More speculative ideas, of course, reach farther. Some have wondered if the story preserves a folk memory of contact with people from a different, isolated ecosystem, or even fueled fantasies of subterranean worlds. The true power of the mystery lies in its poignant humanity. It is not about kings or treasures, but about two lost, frightened strangers. Whether a folk tale that found its way into a chronicle or a genuine historical oddity filtered through the medieval mind, the account endures because it touches on universal themes of displacement, the shock of encountering the utterly other, and the fragile, transformative journey of becoming part of a new world. The girl's story, her strange hue fading as she learned a new language, reminds us that some mysteries are not about what was lost, but about what is gained and lost in the difficult, essential process of finding home. While the green children represent a mystery of human origin, another artifact poses a question of ancient ingenuity. In the basement of the National Museum of Iraq sits a small, unassuming clay jar, roughly the size of a man's fist. It was discovered in the 1930s during excavations near Baghdad, in a village from the Parthian period, dating from around 200 years before the Common Era to 200 years after. At first glance, it appears to be a simple pottery vessel, but its contents tell a different story. Inside the jar, sealed with an asphalt plug, is a rolled copper cylinder, and within that cylinder sits an iron rod. The arrangement is strikingly deliberate. The asphalt plug not only held the components in place, but also served as an effective insulator, preventing the iron and copper from touching each other. To the modern eye, this configuration is instantly recognizable. It looks exactly like a primitive battery. The hypothesis, first proposed in the 1940s, is electrifying in its simplicity. If the jar were filled with an acidic electrolyte, something as common as vinegar or grape juice, the chemical reaction between the acidic solution and the two dissimilar metals would generate a small electrical charge. In experiments, replicas of the so-called Baghdad Battery have consistently produced a low voltage, around 1 to 2 volts, enough to create a faint tingle or, theoretically, to electroplate a thin layer of one metal onto another. This is where the mystery ignites. Was this an ancient power source, a tool used for practical purposes centuries before Alessandro Volta invented the modern battery in 1800? Proponents of this view suggest it could have been used for electroplating, to gild silver objects with a thin layer of gold, a practice known in the region. The small voltage from a single cell could, if linked in a series, produce enough current for such delicate work. They point to the existence of finely gilded artifacts from the same era, whose craftsmanship has never been fully explained. Yet, for such a revolutionary idea, the evidence is frustratingly circumstantial. The central problem is a complete lack of corroboration. Not a single wire, electrode, or electroplated object has ever been found alongside these jars to suggest they were part of an electrical toolkit. No textual references or illustrations from the period describe anything resembling electrical generation or use. Furthermore, several of these jars were found, and not all were configured identically, leading many archaeologists to a more mundane but still significant explanation. The mainstream academic view holds that these were most likely storage vessels for sacred scrolls. The copper cylinder would have held a piece of parchment or papyrus, protected by the asphalt seal from moisture and insects, with the iron rod perhaps serving as a simple roller or a core for the scroll itself. This was a practical and known use for such containers in antiquity. The debate, therefore, is a perfect clash of interpretations. One side sees a spark of lost technological genius, a secret of chemistry harnessed for artistry. The other sees a sophisticated but entirely conventional method of preservation. The artifact itself refuses to declare its purpose. It sits at a crossroads, a testament to how our own modern perspective can cast ancient objects in a revolutionary light. Whether it is a battery or a scroll jar, the object challenges us to ask how we define invention. Is it the conscious creation of a new principle, or can it be the accidental byproduct of a clever solution to an everyday problem? The Baghdad Battery, if that is even its true name, remains an open circuit, a connection not quite made, leaving us to wonder if we are seeing a forgotten flash of brilliance or simply projecting our own world onto the quiet, clay remains of the past. Perhaps no other artifact so perfectly embodies the collision of faith and empirical science. The Shroud of Turin is a length of linen cloth, approximately 14 feet long, bearing the faint, straw-colored image of a man who appears to have suffered the injuries of crucifixion. The figure is front and back, as if the cloth had been laid over and then under a body, creating a mysterious double imprint. For millions of the faithful, this is not merely an image, it is the very burial shroud of Jesus of Nazareth, a sacred relic that miraculously captured his likeness in the moment of resurrection. Its known, documented history, however, begins much later, in the middle of the 14th century in Liège, France, where it was presented by a knight of the era. For centuries it was venerated, survived a chapel fire, and eventually found its home in the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin, Italy. The modern controversy erupted in the late 1980s, when the Vatican permitted a small sample to be removed for radiocarbon dating by 3 independent laboratories. The results, published in 1989, were definitive and shocking to many. The tests dated the linen to between 1260 and 1390, squarely within the medieval period. This seemed to settle the matter scientifically, labeling the shroud as an ingenious medieval forgery, but the mystery refused to die. Almost immediately, questions were raised about the sample itself. Critics pointed out that the piece tested was taken from a corner of the shroud, an area that had been handled, mended, and possibly contaminated over centuries by smoke, water, and human touch, which could have skewed the carbon dating toward a more recent time. Furthermore, the image itself presents puzzles that science still struggles to explain. In a strange twist of fate, it was a photographer in 1898 who made a startling discovery. When he took the first photograph of the shroud, the negative plate revealed a startlingly detailed positive image, a face of haunting depth and clarity. This meant the faint image on the cloth itself behaves like a photographic negative, a concept utterly unknown in the medieval world. How was this effect achieved? The image is not painted with brushstrokes but sits on the very topmost fibers of the linen with no capillary action, as a liquid pigment would show. Studies have detected the presence of iron oxide, a component of some pigments, but in such trace amounts and patterns that do not convincingly explain the entire, precise figure. Other research has claimed to identify traces of human blood, specifically type AB, and particles of limestone dust consistent with Jerusalem tombs. This has led to a spectrum of competing theories that keep the debate fiercely alive. One camp holds that it is indeed a masterful medieval artwork, created perhaps using a primitive form of photography involving a camera obscura and silver compounds, or a bas-relief technique with heated metal. Another proposes a natural chemical process, such as a reaction between ammonia vapors from a body and the carbohydrates on the linen, triggered by a subtle energy release. Those who believe in its authenticity suggest the image was formed by a burst of radiant energy at the moment of resurrection, a phenomenon that could have altered the cloth's carbon signature. The Shroud of Turin, therefore, is more than a simple question of real or fake. It exists in a liminal space, a tangible object that asks us how we weigh hard data against enduring belief, and how a single piece of cloth can become a mirror reflecting our deepest questions about history, divinity, and the very nature of evidence itself. The enduring search for a lost civilization finds its most iconic expression not in archaeology, but in philosophy. The story of Atlantis comes to us from the ancient Greek thinker Plato, who described it in two of his dialogues written around 360 years before the Common Era. In the accounts given by his characters, Atlantis was a vast island empire located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. It was a land of immense wealth and power, with advanced engineering, majestic architecture, and a formidable navy. According to Plato, this great civilization grew arrogant and warlike, attempting to conquer the ancient world. As punishment from the gods, the entire island was swallowed by the sea in a single day and night of catastrophic earthquakes and floods, vanishing forever beneath the waves. For Plato, this tale served a clear purpose. It was a moral and political allegory, a cautionary fable about the dangers of imperial hubris and the decay of an ideal society. He was not writing history, he was illustrating a philosophical point about justice and the fate of nations. Yet, almost from the moment the story was told, listeners began to wonder if there was a real place behind the parable. This question launched one of history's longest and most passionate treasure hunts. If Atlantis was more than a myth, where could it have been? One of the most compelling candidates lies much closer to Greece than Plato suggested. The Minoan civilization on the island of Crete was a sophisticated maritime power that thrived for centuries. Its great palace at Knossos, with its intricate artwork and advanced plumbing, echoes Plato's description of Atlantean grandeur. This civilization suffered a sudden and devastating collapse around 1600 years before the Common Era, very likely due to the colossal volcanic eruption on the nearby island of Thera, modern-day Santorini. The eruption was one of the largest in human history, triggering massive tsunamis that would have ravaged coastal cities across the eastern Mediterranean. Could the memory of this real-world catastrophe, passed down through generations, have inspired Plato's tale of a mighty empire lost to the sea? Other theories look farther afield. Some have proposed a location in the Atlantic Ocean itself, perhaps on a now submerged landmass like the Dogger Bank between Britain and Denmark, or even linking it to the legend of the rich Tartessos culture in southern Spain. More speculative ideas place the lost city near the Azores, in the Caribbean, or beneath the ice of Antarctica, though these lack any archaeological support. The truth is that no definitive evidence for a literal Atlantis has ever been found, and most scholars agree Plato invented the story for his own philosophical ends. But the enduring power of the search tells us something profound. Atlantis resonates because it touches on a deep-seated human fascination with golden ages and sudden endings. It represents the haunting idea that a society more advanced, more enlightened, or simply different from our own could rise to glory and then be utterly erased, leaving only a whisper in the philosophical record. The quest for Atlantis, therefore, is not really a search for ruins on the ocean floor. It is a search for meaning, a way to grapple with the fragility of civilization itself and the persistent hope that somewhere beneath the waves of time, proof of a forgotten greatness still waits to be discovered. The search for a lost civilization speaks to our fear of collective erasure, but a more personal terror can be found in a series of deliberate, taunting messages. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, Northern California was gripped by fear of an individual who called himself the Zodiac. This unidentified person was linked to a series of violent attacks, but his legacy was cemented not just by these acts, but by the cryptic communications he sent to local newspapers. He authored a series of letters filled with bizarre symbols and coded ciphers, daring the public and the police to catch him. Of the 4 known ciphers he sent, only one, a relatively short message, was ever officially solved. That decrypted note was a chilling mix of bragging and mockery, opening with the words, "I like killing people because it is so much fun." The solution proved he was the author, but it revealed nothing about who he was. This left the other, more complex codes as the heart of the mystery. The most famous of these, known as the 340-character cipher for its length, was a grid of seemingly random symbols that defied the world's best cryptanalysts for over 5 decades. It was a direct, arrogant challenge left hanging in the air, a puzzle that many believed might hold his name or location. The breakthrough, when it finally came, was mired in controversy. In 2020, a private team announced they had cracked the 340 cipher using a complex method of manipulation. Their solution presented another taunting message, but one that did not reveal a clear identity. Almost immediately, experts from the FBI and external code-breaking communities questioned the method, suggesting the solution might be a forced interpretation rather than a true decryption. This left the public in a strange limbo with a potential answer that could not be fully trusted, meaning the cipher effectively remains an open question. Why do these unsolved codes matter so deeply? They transform the case from a series of tragic events into an ongoing conversation, a one-sided dialogue where the other participant holds all the keys. The ciphers are the purest expression of the killer's desire for notoriety and control, a game he constructed to ensure his presence would linger long after the attack stopped. Each unsolved grid of symbols is a locked door behind which his motives and perhaps his identity sit just out of reach. This blend of true crime and cryptology creates a unique historical artifact, one where the mystery is actively encoded. The Zodiac's legacy, therefore, is a paradox. He sought fame through obscurity, crafting a puzzle that guarantees he will be remembered not for who he was, but for the provocative, unanswered question he left behind. Isolated in the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean, Easter Island stands as a testament to human ambition and a profound, unanswered question. The island is famous for its nearly 1,000 massive stone figures, the moai, their solemn faces gazing inland across the grassy slopes. These are not mere statues but monumental ancestors carved from compressed volcanic ash at a single quarry and then transported, some weighing over 80 tons, to ceremonial platforms called ahu along the coastline. The engineering feat alone is staggering for a society with no metal tools, no wheels, and no large animals to assist them. For generations, the prevailing story of what happened here was a stark parable of self-destruction. It was said that the Rapa Nui people, in their fervor to erect ever larger moai, completely deforested their fragile island. Without trees, they could not build fishing canoes, soils eroded, and food supplies collapsed. This ecological catastrophe, the narrative went, sparked violent internal conflict, a societal crash, and a dramatic population decline by the time European explorers arrived. This story framed Easter Island as a microcosm of a planet pushed beyond its limits. Yet, newer archaeological discoveries are painting a far more complex and resilient picture, revealing a mystery not just of collapse but of astonishing adaptation. Evidence now suggests the population may have been smaller and more sustainable than previously thought, and that the deforestation was a gradual process intertwined with the arrival of Polynesian rats that prevented regrowth. Crucially, the toppling of the moai, once seen as proof of civil war, may have been a deliberate, ritual act of ancestor reverence, a way of retiring old symbols to make way for new beliefs, particularly the Birdman cult that rose to prominence later. This revised view does not erase the hardship the Rapa Nui faced, including the tragic impacts of later European contact, but it challenges the simple collapse model. It suggests a society that, faced with immense environmental change, transformed its cultural practices and social structure to survive. The deeper mystery, then, is not merely how they moved the giants, but why they stopped, and what profound spiritual and social evolution took place in the shadows of those silent stone faces. The moai stand not as tombstones for a failed people, but as enduring markers of a culture's incredible creative peak and its subsequent resilient pivot, a powerful reminder that the end of one chapter is often the difficult beginning of another. The silent, resilient story of Easter Island gives way to a modern mystery where the wilderness itself seems to have turned hostile. In the freezing winter of 1959, a group of 9 experienced Soviet hikers, led by Igor Dyatlov, embarked on a trek through the northern Ural Mountains. They were students and graduates from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, skilled and prepared for the harsh conditions. They never returned. When a search party finally located their camp weeks later on the slope of Zodiac, or Dead Mountain, they uncovered a scene of profound and chilling disorder. The group's tent had been cut open from the inside, as if its occupants had fled in desperate haste. Footprints led away from the camp toward the tree line, but they were strange, made by people who were either barefoot or wearing only socks in the deep snow. The searchers then began to find the hikers one by one. 2 were discovered near a cedar tree, dressed only in their undergarments, having apparently tried to start a fire. 3 more were found between the tree and the tent, as if they had been trying to crawl back to camp. All 5 had succumbed to hypothermia. Months later, with the spring thaw, the remaining 4 members were located in a ravine, buried under deep snow. Their injuries were severe and baffling. One hiker had a fractured skull. Another had massive chest trauma, comparable to the force of a car collision, yet with no external wounds. One of the women was missing her tongue. Crucially, there were no signs of a struggle with another person, and all the hikers' belongings, including their journals, were left behind in the tent. The official Soviet investigation, conducted in secrecy, concluded the group had met with a compelling natural force, but the case was closed with no definitive answer, leaving a vacuum filled by decades of speculation. So what compelled 9 rational, trained individuals to flee their shelter into sub-zero temperatures without proper clothing? The most accepted theory points to a rare slab avalanche. A sudden shift of snow could have created a deafening noise and pressure, prompting the hikers to cut their way out in panic. The chest injuries could be explained by the weight of compacted snow, and the paradoxical undressing is a known, if tragic, symptom of severe hypothermia where victims, confused and feeling intensely hot, shed their clothes. Yet, avalanche experts note the slope was not steep enough for a typical event, and no significant avalanche debris was recorded. Other natural explanations include infrasound, low-frequency sound waves generated by wind over the mountain ridges that can induce feelings of dread and panic, potentially triggering an irrational flight response. More speculative ideas involve military testing in the remote area, perhaps with sonic weapons or even a misplaced missile, though no evidence supports this. The mystery endures because the evidence presents a contradictory puzzle. The injuries suggest immense, focused force, yet the scene lacks the chaos of an attack. The behavior suggests blind panic, yet the hikers were among the most competent not to succumb to simple fear. The Dyatlov Pass incident remains a haunting blueprint for how the natural world, under the right confluence of strange and terrible circumstances, can compel human beings to act in ways that, to those who find them later, tell a story that seems to defy every law of reason and survival. A mountain pass can swallow 9 lives, but an empire can hide one. The final resting place of Genghis Khan represents perhaps the most consequential missing location in all of human history. This was the founder of the Mongol Empire, a figure whose conquests reshaped continents, connected east and west through the Silk Road, and left a genetic and cultural imprint across a vast portion of the globe. When he passed away in 1227, the historical accounts, primarily from Persian and Chinese sources, agree on one extraordinary point: his burial was to be the ultimate secret. According to these records, his funeral procession was accompanied by a military escort that killed every person they encountered along the route to prevent any knowledge of the direction. Once the great Khan was laid to rest, the stories say, the soldiers who built the tomb were themselves put to rest to ensure their silence. Then, most famously, legend claims a river was diverted to flow directly over the grave site, forever concealing it beneath the water and the earth. After this, the horses that transported the body were set free to trample the area, and trees were planted over everything, leaving no visible marker. The goal was absolute erasure. For the Mongols, this was not merely about hiding treasure, though the tomb likely held immense riches. It was about protecting the spiritual sanctity of their supreme leader, ensuring his journey to the afterlife was undisturbed and preventing any enemy from desecrating the site. In death as in life, Genghis Khan commanded a loyalty and a secrecy that has endured for nearly 800 years. This has created the ultimate historical treasure hunt, one that has drawn explorers, archaeologists, and adventurers for centuries. The search is monumental, both in its scale and its challenges. Mongolia is a vast nation with sweeping steppes, rugged mountains, and remote valleys that have changed little since the 13th century. For decades, searches were based on fragmentary clues from ancient texts and local oral traditions, leading to countless false hopes and unverified claims. In the modern era, the hunt has gone high-tech. International teams have employed satellite imagery to scan for unnatural formations, ground-penetrating radar to peer beneath the soil, and even drones to survey inaccessible terrain. One major multi-year project, the Valley of the Khans, used non-invasive techniques to identify promising sites, always with the permission and participation of Mongolian authorities. Yet, despite these sophisticated tools, the tomb remains elusive. The reasons for this are a perfect storm of historical and cultural factors. First is the deliberate obfuscation by the Khan's own followers. The measures they took were brutally effective, creating a clean break in the trail. Second is the sheer, overwhelming size of the search area. Without a specific regional clue, it is like searching for a single, unmarked stone in an ocean of grass. But the third, and perhaps most important reason, is deep cultural sensitivity. For many Mongolians, Genghis Khan is not just a historical figure, he is a revered father of the nation, a symbol of identity and unity. The idea of excavating his tomb is seen by many as a profound disrespect, a violation of the eternal peace his followers fought so hard to secure. The Mongolian government has historically been very cautious, often restricting archaeological permits in sacred areas. This transforms the search from a simple archaeological dig into a delicate negotiation between historical curiosity and living tradition. So the mystery stands not as a failure of technology, but as a testament to the enduring power of a command given 8 centuries ago. The tomb of Genghis Khan is more than a hidden grave. It is the final, unbroken seal of an empire's loyalty. Finding it would unlock unparalleled insights into the Mongol world, but perhaps its continued secrecy is the most fitting legacy for a man who commanded the known world, yet whose own resting place was commanded by him to remain forever unknown, a secret kept not by stone or river, but by the unwavering will of a people and the timeless landscape they call home. From vanished colonies to unbreakable codes, these 20 mysteries share a profound commonality. They each represent a boundary, a place where the solid ground of historical evidence gives way to the shifting sands of speculation. In every case, whether it is the silent stones of Carnac or the frantic dance in Strasbourg, we are confronted with the ultimate limits of our knowledge. The records run out, the trail goes cold, and we are left with fragments that refuse to form a complete picture. This is not a failure of history, but its essential condition. The past is not a fully preserved fossil, but a mosaic where many of the original tiles have been lost, leaving tantalizing gaps in the design. What we choose to place in those gaps reveals as much about us as it does about the people we study. Our relentless drive to find patterns, to weave narratives from disparate threads, is a fundamental human impulse. we see a cluster of disappearances in an ocean and name it a triangle of supernatural power. We find a greenish tint in a medieval chronicle and spin tales of otherworldly lands. We project our hopes for contact onto a 72-second blip of radio static. These mysteries endure not because they are unsolvable puzzles, but because they are blank canvases upon which we paint our deepest curiosities, our fears, and our longing for a world more wondrous than the one we know. They remind us that history is not a closed book of settled facts, but an ongoing conversation between the past and the present, a dialogue fueled by every new discovery and every stubborn question we refuse to stop asking. The true value of these enigmas lies not in a potential solution, but in the journey of inquiry itself. They are catalysts for curiosity, forcing us to look closer, to question assumptions, and to appreciate the incredible diversity and resilience of the human experience across time. They teach us humility in the face of the vast unknown, while simultaneously inspiring the boldness to keep searching. So, as we leave these 20 mysteries behind, consider which one lingers most powerfully in your mind. Does the fate of the lost colony haunt you, or does the silent sophistication of the Antikythera Mechanism fill you with awe? Share your thoughts, and let that curiosity be your guide to further discovery. For every unanswered question is an invitation to look deeper into the extraordinary story of our world.